What happens when a powerful black female CEO walks away from a $500 million deal just because she's disrespected? This story will leave you inspired and questioning the true cost of success. You won't believe what happens next. Before dive, and let us know from where you are watch. We love to know your thoughts. Don't miss out what happened next. Let's dive in. In the heart of New York's bustling financial district, the mood inside the sleek glass tower of Langston Enterprises was nothing short of electric. This was a meeting that could change everything, a $500 million deal on the table, and the future of two companies hanging in the balance. The pressure was on. On one side of the table sat Sarah Carter, a black female CEO known for her sharp business acumen and relentless drive. A trailblazer in every sense, Sarah had fought her way to the top in a world that often looked the other way when it came to women, especially women of color. But Sarah was different. She wasn't just sitting at the table she was commanding. The room. Across from her sat the powerful Langston family, a well-known dynasty whose influence spanned multiple industries. The family's patriarch, Jonathan Langston, was a seasoned business tycoon, with his two adult children beside him, each brimming with the kind of arrogant confidence that only years of wealth and privilege could provide. The Langstons were known for their cutthroat tactics, their ability to push through any deal, no matter the cost. This negotiation was supposed to be a win-win, a partnership that would boost both their fortunes, or so they thought. The air was thick with anticipation. The Langstons, sitting comfortably in their tailored suits, exuded a sense of superiority that was impossible to ignore. They were the kings of their domain, accustomed to getting what they wanted, and they expected Sarah to bend to their will, just like countless others who had crossed their paths in the past. But Sarah wasn't just another cog in their machine. She wasn't intimidated by their wealth or their status. Her worth had been earned, not handed to her. And she knew this deal was about more than just money. It was about respect, recognition, and equality. As the discussion began, Sarah held her ground, articulating her vision for the partnership with a level of precision and authority that caught the Langstons slightly off guard. She was sharp but graceful, her words calculated yet confident. The Langstons had initially underestimated her, mistaking her calm demeanor for weakness, but they soon realized that Sarah wasn't playing by their rules. She was playing by her own. But just as the conversation was picking up momentum, a shift occurred. One of Jonathan's children, a young man in his 30s, made an offhand comment, an attempt at humor, or perhaps a subtle jab that disrupted the flow. With a smirk, he leaned forward, looking at Sarah like she was a puzzle that needed solving. "You know, Sarah," he said with a chuckle, "I've always admired your persistence, but let's be real, how many deals have you actually closed on your own? Without the help of others, I mean. It's always easier when you have someone like your mentor pushing you along, right?" The comment was thinly veiled, and everyone in the room felt its sting. It was clear what he meant. In that moment, the Langstons had attempted to disarm her by undermining her expertise and achievements. They were questioning her ability, subtly, diminishing her accomplishments based on her race and gender. The subtle microaggressions, always present but never directly addressed, had risen to the surface. The power dynamics in the room had shifted, and the Langstons had unknowingly set the stage for what was to come. For a split second, Sarah's mind flashed to all the battles she'd fought to get to this point. The countless hours, the setbacks, the doubters, the barriers, everything that had brought her here. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she met the young man's gaze with a calmness that only added to the tension in the room. "Perhaps it's not about how many deals I've closed alone," Sarah replied, her voice smooth and controlled, "but rather the value I bring to the table when I do. Unlike some, I don't rely on others to prop me up. I build things from the ground up." The room went still. Sarah's words hung in the air like a challenge. The Langstons, for the first time in the meeting, looked taken aback. Her presence had just shifted the power dynamic completely, forcing them to see her for what she truly was, a force to be reckoned with. The conversation continued, but the foundation had been set. Sarah knew the stakes, and she wasn't about to let anyone dismiss her. The deal was far from final, but in that moment she'd already won. Sarah Carter was not just here to close a deal, she was here to redefine the rules of the game. And the Langstons were about to learn just how costly it could be to underestimate her. The mood in the room shifted as the conversation continued, like a storm cloud suddenly rolling in over a calm sea. The Langstons, still nursing their bruised egos, attempted to regain control of the discussion. But Sarah's poised confidence only seemed to rattle them more. She wasn't just presenting numbers and facts, she was challenging their preconceived notions about what a woman, especially a woman of color, could achieve in a world where power was traditionally dominated by men like them. But Jonathan Langston, the patriarch, wasn't one to back down easily. He had spent his entire life navigating and manipulating the world of business, always coming out on top, never showing weakness. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Sarah, a glimmer of irritation flashing behind his cool, calculating demeanor. He couldn't afford to let this black CEO stand in the way of his legacy, his empire. His wealth was his weapon, and in his world it was all that mattered. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with subtle condescension. "Sarah," he said with a slight chuckle, "I admire your spirit, but let's be real. Your company is still relatively young, and let's not pretend this deal is going to change your future. You'll always be in our shadow." The words hung in the air, sharp and biting, a direct attack aimed at her very identity. The Langstons weren't just questioning her business acumen, they were questioning her worth as a leader, as a woman who had built an empire from the ground up. The air in the room thickened, and for a moment it felt like time had frozen. Sarah's heart pounded, but she remained calm, the only outward sign of her growing frustration a slight tightening of her jaw. She had been through this before. Men like Jonathan believed that their status gave them the right to belittle others, to make them feel small, to remind them of their place. But Sarah was no stranger to this battle. She had fought this fight her entire life. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before responding. "Your shadow doesn't scare me, Jonathan," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with an unmistakable firmness. "In fact, I've been building something far bigger than your shadow. My company isn't just here to follow in anyone's footsteps, it's here to carve its own path." The room fell silent, the Langstons now looking at her with a mixture of disbelief and begrudging respect. They had expected her to cower, to bend to their will, as so many had before, but Sarah wasn't one of those people. She wasn't a woman who could be bought, bullied, or intimidated into submission. She had earned every bit of her success, and she wasn't about to let a group of wealthy elite dictate her value. Jonathan's expression darkened, and for the first time, the dynamic of the meeting truly began to shift. He knew that he had underestimated her, had assumed that because she was black, and because she was a woman, she wouldn't have the spine to fight back in a world dominated by powerful men. "Let me make one thing clear, Sarah," Jonathan said, his tone now cold and dangerous. "You can play the hero all you want, but this deal is what keeps your company afloat. You need us more than we need you." The venom in his words was palpable, and Sarah could feel it like a weight in the room. It was a blatant attempt to force her hand, to remind her that the Langstons held all the power. But this time Sarah wasn't going to back down. The years of being underestimated, of being seen as lesser by men like Jonathan, had prepared her for this moment. Her eyes locked with Jonathan's, and for the first time, she allowed herself to let the tension show. "No, Jonathan," she said quietly, her voice carrying with a newfound weight. "I don't need you. My company doesn't need you. What I need is respect, and I won't settle for anything less." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Sarah had just turned the tables completely. In one moment, she had not only defended herself, but had set the tone for the rest of the negotiation. She wasn't here to beg for a deal. She was here to command it. But the Langstons weren't about to give up so easily. Jonathan's eyes flickered with anger, and his son, sitting quietly beside him, couldn't hide the smug grin that crept onto his face. They may have been rattled, but they weren't finished. As the conversation continued, Sarah knew that she had just reached the breaking point, not just in the meeting, but in her career. This was no longer about a deal, it was about setting boundaries and demanding respect. And Sarah wasn't going to back down until she had it. The tension in the room was thick, like a weight pressing down on Sarah's shoulders, but she stood tall, unwavering. Jonathan Langston's latest words echoed in her mind. "You need us more than we need you." The statement cut deep, but not because it was true. No, it was because it represented everything that had been wrong with the world Sarah had fought to succeed in. Men like Jonathan, with their inherited wealth and privilege, had lived their lives believing they were above others, that their status made them the ultimate authority. But Sarah had never played by those rules. She had built her empire from the ground up, never relying on handouts or the protection of those with power. And that's exactly why she wasn't about to let Jonathan's arrogance sway her. Her company, a leading tech firm in the competitive market, had been thriving, growing at an exponential rate despite facing constant barriers, many of them the result of a system built to favor the elite. But now, here she was, facing a $500 million deal with the very people who epitomized everything that had held back others for so long. In their eyes, she was simply a businesswoman with a nice idea, someone they could use for profit and then toss aside when they no longer had a need for her. Yet, as the deal loomed larger, Sarah realized that she had come to a crossroads, one that could shape the future of her company. She had worked tirelessly to get where she was, but more importantly, she had never allowed anyone to diminish her worth. And this meeting, this moment, was no different. The words from Jonathan were enough to ignite something inside her, a fierce determination that burned brighter than ever. In that split second, Sarah knew exactly what she had to do. She had already decided, even before Jonathan had finished speaking. The deal wasn't worth it. No amount of money could buy her integrity, and no financial gain could make her settle for being treated as less than equal. With a calm breath, she stood up from her chair, the movement fluid and graceful, but imbued with a quiet power. Her eyes met Jonathan's, and for the first time in the meeting, it was clear who truly held the power in the room, not him. Not his family, it was her. And she wasn't going to be intimidated. "I'm afraid this isn't going to work," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm, filling the room with an authority that sent a ripple of surprise through the Langstons. "I won't sign this deal under these circumstances. Not for $500 million. Not for any amount of money." Jonathan's face tightened with disbelief and he leaned forward, his voice laced with an attempt at control. "Sarah, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You'll regret walking away from this." But Sarah shook her head. "I won't regret walking away. What I regret is allowing someone like you to think that this deal was ever about money. It's about respect. And you've made it clear you don't value that?" The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah had said it out loud, the very thing they had been trying to bury. The truth had been exposed, and there was no going back. The Langstons had tried to use her, belittle her, but in the end it wasn't just about the $500 million. It was about something much more valuable: her dignity, her self-respect, and her worth as a leader. Jonathan's face darkened, his control slipping, but Sarah didn't falter. She turned toward the door, her steps purposeful, each one reaffirming her decision. She knew this would be seen as a gamble by some. Walking away from such a lucrative deal wasn't a choice many people would understand. But for Sarah, it was the only choice. As she reached for the door handle, she turned one last time to face the room. "If you ever learn to respect others, maybe we can talk again. But not today." With that, Sarah walked out of the room, leaving behind not just a deal, but a legacy that would resonate far beyond this single moment. She wasn't just another CEO trying to win a deal. She was a leader who stood up for what was right, even when the odds were against her. And as she left the building, she felt the weight lift off her shoulders. She had made the right decision. As Sarah walked away from the Langston Enterprises building, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had just walked out of a $500 million deal, the kind of opportunity that most people would sell their souls to secure. The gravity of the moment didn't fully settle in until she was in the car on her way back to the office. It felt surreal, but the certainty in her heart was undeniable. She knew she had done the right thing, even if it meant walking away from the financial windfall. Back at her company's headquarters, Sarah was met with an unexpected flood of support. As soon as news of the canceled deal hit the press, social media exploded with a mix of shock and admiration. Some questioned her decision. Many couldn't understand why she would turn down an opportunity that could have propelled her company to the next level. But others saw what Sarah had done. She had chosen integrity over profit, respect over submission. They saw a leader who wasn't afraid to stand up to the established system, to the powerful elite who had made a habit of exploiting others for their own gain. The media quickly picked up on the story, and Sarah became a symbol of resilience, integrity, and unapologetic self-respect. CEO walks away from $500 million deal over disrespect was the headline of the day. Commentators, influencers, and business leaders alike were praising her for taking a stand. It was rare to see someone in such a powerful position walk away from money and prestige for the sake of principle, and it struck a chord with people from all walks of life. Investors who had previously hesitated to back her company now saw her in a new light. They were drawn not just to her business acumen, but to her character, her ability to lead with authenticity and strength. Her decision, though risky, proved that Sarah wasn't just about making money, she was about making a difference. In the following weeks, her firm received an influx of new clients, many of whom were drawn to her vision of business done with integrity. But the Langstons were not going to let Sarah's defiance slide so easily. Jonathan Langston was furious. He had expected Sarah to bend, to succumb to the weight of the financial opportunity. His pride was wounded, and his family's reputation was now at risk. He wasn't about to lose face in front of the business world. Behind closed doors, the Langstons began planning their next move, vowing to undermine Sarah's company and her position as a leader in the industry. But Sarah was already prepared for the fallout. Her decision to walk away wasn't an impulsive one, it was a calculated risk. She knew that people like Jonathan Langston had always used their power to control others. But now it was time for someone to show them that the true strength of a leader wasn't in their ability to manipulate or dominate, but in their ability to stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. In the quiet aftermath, as Sarah sat at her desk reflecting on the whirlwind of events, she felt a sense of pride. She had made a bold decision, one that would echo throughout her career. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was more determined than ever to continue leading with honor, to prove that business could be both profitable and ethical, and that success wasn't measured just by the size of your deals, but by the strength of your values. Her phone buzzed with messages of support from colleagues, partners, and even strangers who had seen her actions as a sign of what true leadership looked like. They had watched as a woman stood up to the system, walked away from money, and refused to compromise her principles. And in doing so, Sarah had earned something far more valuable than any business deal: respect, admiration, and the unwavering belief that she could change the game for the better. As Sarah looked out of her office window, the city stretching out before her, she knew that the journey ahead would be just as difficult as it had been to get here. But now, more than ever, she was ready to lead with her head held high, and she knew her path would only get brighter from here. Weeks passed, and the aftermath of Sarah's bold decision began to settle into a new reality. The business world, with all its complexities and shifting power dynamics, had witnessed something extraordinary: a leader who had refused to compromise on her principles, regardless of the stakes. The headlines continued to buzz, with the narrative shifting from shock to admiration. Her decision to walk away from the $500 million deal became not just a story of business, but a story of personal strength, character, and the fight for respect. It had captured the attention of people across industries and across the world, making Sarah Carter a symbol of integrity. As the dust settled, Sarah's company began to thrive in ways no one had expected. Despite walking away from such a monumental deal, her firm saw an unexpected surge in growth. Investors who had initially been cautious, unsure of the CEO who had so publicly rejected a lucrative partnership, now recognized her true value. Sarah wasn't just a businesswoman with a good idea, she was a visionary leader who had the courage to walk away when the cost was too high. Her integrity became her brand, and people were drawn to that authenticity. It wasn't just the business world that took notice. Across the nation, women in leadership, people of color, and anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated found inspiration in Sarah's story. Her actions were a beacon of hope for those who had been told that their worth was limited by their background, their race, or their gender. Sarah had proven that the road to success didn't have to come at the expense of one's values or dignity. The Langstons, however, were still fuming. Jonathan Langston had underestimated the power of Sarah's resolve, and in the months following the canceled deal, he sought out ways to sabotage her company. But Sarah was prepared. She knew this fight wasn't just about one deal, it was about changing the very nature of business. Every challenge the Langstons threw her way, every attempt to undermine her, only made Sarah more determined to prove that success built on integrity could not be taken down by financial power alone. Soon, more clients flocked to Sarah's company, impressed not just by her company's track record, but by the principles she upheld. Businesses that shared her values sought her out, wanting to partner with someone who was as committed to making a difference in the world as they were to making a profit. Her reputation as a leader who could be trusted was cemented, and her influence expanded beyond just the boardroom. She became a sought-after speaker, a role model for young entrepreneurs, and an advocate for ethical business practices. As Sarah's influence grew, she took on more opportunities to speak on panels, attend conferences, and even mentor young women leaders. Her story, one of self-respect, courage, and unshakable values, became a rallying cry for a new generation of business leaders who understood that success wasn't just about profit margins. It was about the difference you could make in the world. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her office overlooking the New York skyline, she reflected on everything that had happened. The road had been anything but easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments where she questioned whether she had made the right decision. But as she looked at the success she had built, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of relationships, partnerships, and trust, she knew that walking away from that deal had been the best thing she had ever done. Her legacy, she realized, wasn't just about the wealth she had accumulated or the deals she had closed. It was about the people she had inspired, the doors she had opened for others, and the example she had set for what it meant to lead with integrity in a world that often values power over principle. With a smile, Sarah turned back to her desk, ready to face the next challenge. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And she knew, with unwavering certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Sarah's journey wasn't just about business, it was about standing tall when everyone expected her to bow down. She proved that success isn't measured by how much you have, but by how much you're willing to hold on to your values, no matter the cost. Sarah Carter didn't just close a deal. She changed the game, showing the world that true leaders lead with integrity, courage, and authenticity. If you're inspired by Sarah's story, hit subscribe. Drew your city name below in comments and join us for more powerful stories that remind us all to stand firm in who we are. Because in a world full of deals, it's your principles that make you truly untouchable.